Welcome to the Crypto News. In today's video, Lyn Alden shares his view on the current economic situation in Bitcoin. Listen to what she has to say.
People in developed countries, they never wake up most of them don't wake up and think I have a payments problem. It's really hard for me to make payments. In the developing world, that's generally a much bigger problem.
Yeah.
And Lightning opens up interesting things, and Bitcoin in general opens up interesting things. I mean, if you're a programmer in a country and you can now get international payments directly from them without going through their country's banking system. It's basically peer-to-peer finance. And then they have a unit that is harder than their local currency. So one, it connects global labor, global work, global productivity in a way that didn't exist before. And number two, I think that this is where, in many cases, store of value will precede medium of exchange, in the sense that, I also, just like you, don't necessarily want to spend a ton of Bitcoin. I want to hold Bitcoin. I'd rather spend dollars because they go down over time. So I separate two phases of expected Bitcoin volatility.
Yeah.
So so Bitcoin, when it was invented, is this brand new thing, and the market has to figure out how to price this thing. And originally it was a couple cypherpunks. They barely had a price, and then it was people that want to buy drugs online. There are Austrian economics. All these new pools of people were like, wait a second, what is this thing?
Yeah.
And then the Human Rights Foundation got, human rights activists get into it, and multiple groups of people realize it solves a problem that they have. And it could be very different problems. Some people want the store of value problem solved. Some people want the medium of exchange problem solved. There's all these different problems that it's being solved. But it's with upward volatility. So if a lot of new people come to the network, the price goes up very rapidly. That's by definition volatility. It's the volatility people like. It's upward volatility, but that is a type of upward volatility. It's inevitable. If you go from zero to trillions of dollars in market capitalization, by definition, you're volatile. And then with upward volatility comes speculation, leverage, overexuberance, and then you're going to have massive pullbacks. And so there's really no other way around it. When people say Bitcoin is not workable because it's too volatile, they're basically saying that no new private money can ever work, because you can't just start at a $20 trillion market capitalization.
Yeah.
And so if you're going from nothing to whatever total addressable market you're going to reach, you're going to be volatile. So I separate the first handful of decades. We don't know how long it's going to take. We don't know for sure it's going to be successful. We don't know the quote unquote end game of where this is going, but we can at least infer, assuming Bitcoin continues to be successful, assuming it continues to take market share, assuming that the adoption pattern continues, eventually it reaches some steady state. How big is that? There's all these different estimates for is it as big as gold? Is it twice as big as gold? Is it hyper Bitcoinization? Whatever steady state it kind of reaches, that's when you'd expect it to be less volatile than it is now. There will still be some volatility, because essentially at that point it's stable, but other things are volatile. I mean, oil's volatile. Other things are volatile. But you don't have that huge. There's less a reason to leverage it up tremendously when it's a mature asset that most people already hold. So right now, because it's more speculative asset, it's 13 years old. People are debating, what's the government going to do when it's 5 times bigger? What does this mean? What is this other competitor? There's all these things. The market is doing all this stuff, and then people are leveraging it. So it's going to be volatile in the near term. And I think that does slow down its medium of exchange usage for a lot of people. But I think that that's solved itself over time as more people decide that they want to hold it despite the volatility, because they look at the long-term properties of it. And then once they hold a ton of it, eventually they might want to spend some of it. But I think what Satoshi invented was basically the world's best ledger, right? So I think Darren Feinstein would call it triple entry bookkeeping.
I think I was sat with John Pfeffer, and he said Wentz's orange pilled him on it. He said, money is a ledger and Bitcoin is the best ledger.
Yes, that's the best way to describe it. Basically, I think the best way to describe money is either the most saleable good, which is the kind of the more commodity oriented view of money. And I think that's accurate. And another way to describe it is that it's ledgers. And usually ledgers correspond to commodity monies in history, but they don't have to, obviously in the current era. And so in that sense, the best ledger, the one that is, you can't fudge the numbers, it's not opaque, right? And so the combination of the best ledger with a hard unit of account in that ledger system is a pretty marvelous revolution.
Yeah.
And that brings, it's basically faster than gold, but more auditable and harder than fiat. And so it kind of acts as its own decentralized transfer agent and registrar, which is it's a marvelous technology. And I think he solved a lot of problems, and it's still very early on in its testing and adoption phase. So, initially it had some bugs. Initially, cypherpunks were interested in it for what it could be. Then you started to see practical use cases of people getting deplatformed, where people want to buy things they're not supposed to. So for both good reasons and bad reasons, people saw this as permissionless, censorship-resistant medium of exchange. So actually pretty early on in its adoption cycle, its medium of exchange was right there from the beginning.
Yes.
But it's not optimized for everyone just to buy coffee with it around the world, 1 billion transactions a second or whatever. That's not what it's meant for. It's meant for that censorship-resistant money that's kind of everybody's backup money if you get deplatformed or if you need this in any way. And of course, we can build layers on top of it to also make it everyday money. But I think that's the biggest thing, that it basically gave everyone the ability to have one, portable money, so you can self-custody money and then even bring that globally, which is actually really hard to do with gold or cash or things like that. And the number two is that you can then do a transaction that is very hard to block. I think now that Lightning is usable and liquid and increasingly developed, I think we're getting pretty close. I think we still need better, we still need years of development to make it better and better. But basically, it's turning into a full stack network. Okay. And so if we go back to, our current system's layered approach, right? We don't all use Fedwire to buy things with. We use these layers on top, and then they settle with things like Fedwire.
So is Fedwire like the base chain?
Yes.
Okay.
And so when we look at Bitcoin and Lightning, Bitcoin obviously has limits on how much transactions can happen. And then also they're pretty slow. And so that's fine in some circumstances, but it's generally not a good thing for 1 billion people to buy coffees with, right? There's not enough throughput. And, if you're doing an in-person transaction, if they want to wait at least for confirmation time, they're going to be waiting for a while. Yes, Lightning only works because the base chain works.
Yeah.
And so some of the initial designs of how to increase throughput were like, okay, we'll just add block size and block times. But then the problem is that individual nodes become so hard to run that you basically need to be a data center. You need enterprise grade bandwidth and storage to run a node. You basically turn into Visa, right? So if you increase that way, that's a problem. So the Bitcoin stack has instead gone vertical and said, look, we're going to keep the nodes small. Even if we try to change them, we can't, because you can't just push updates to users. They try the whole block size war. And so you have small blocks, small bandwidth, limited number of transactions, which is actually similar in size to Fedwire's number of transactions. Yeah. It's very similar to the size of Fedwire. But then on top of that, you can have an arbitrary number of different transactions. You could just use fully custodial ones. Like if you use Cash App and you want to send Bitcoin to someone else, you can do that. But Lightning is interesting because you can still use it peer-to-peer while still getting that bigger throughput. So basically, it's channel-based instead of broadcast-based. And of course, Bitcoiners know this, but I think the broader investment community is still very unaware of how Lightning works. One is that liquidity issue, that it just took time to build up liquidity. And as you point out, there's still insufficient liquidity if you wanted to reliably send large payments. So that's a limitation. Then there's still, Lightning network's like a hot network, right? So if you're on the Lightning network, you want to be online, right? It's not like you can just, with Bitcoin, you can just be in cold storage and someone can send, payment to you, and you don't as a receiver, you don't have to interact in any way. And so Lightning is inherently a more interactive, more complex experience, unless you can, as we've seen in wallets and things like that, increasingly obfuscate that. So one risk is that it can become too custodial, because often the easiest experiences will be custodial. And so I think that's a limitation. You want to have more and more tools to make it increasingly easy to use it. And we see, for example, Blockstream with Greenlight, basically you can put some of the infrastructure to run it in the cloud while the user still has the keys. So there are increasing ways to make it very easy to operate while the user still has, ultimately the say.
I have bad news for you. If you're not rich by now, you're screwed. And if you're in debt, you're even double screwed. How so, you might wonder? Well, the sad truth is that you're working your whole life to make someone else rich. The mega corporations, the banks, the politicians, everyone is getting richer. They get your money. And what is even worse, they get your time, they get your life. You are not even in a rat race, you're in a financial prison. But what could a solution for you look like? Honestly, I don't know, but I know what a solution for me would look like. It's very simple. I use whatever money I have and I multiply it with 1,000. This could make my life much easier and probably yours as well. If you have $1,000 available and multiply this with 1,000, I believe that this could solve some financial issue for the one or the other. Of course, if you're ugly, you would have to multiply it with much more than 1,000. My name is Markus Dahn, and this is what I decided to do. I decided to 1000x my money. This is not a joke. I know what you may be thinking. What is this guy talking about? How should this work? This is not possible. Well, I made a detailed video where I laid out my plan. And some clever folks might even want to look at this plan and copy it and do exactly what I do. This is just a little hint on the side. You have two options. You leave, you forget what you have seen. You do whatever you're doing and you hope that somehow you get some other results. Good luck with that. Or you click the link below the video. You enter your email address because I'm not showing this to everybody. You at least watch my video on how I plan to 1000x my money. The choice is yours. Make the right choice. Join me. See what a different future you could have. See at least how I intend, how I plan to do the 1000x. So click on the link below, enter your email address, and I see you on the other side. Your Markus Dahn.